Hey guys, so today we are going to look at some interactive student notebook ideas. So here's one with just a number line, super simple, folds out. And what we would do with students is not only they could use their finger, not only could they use their finger to count across here, but we actually had a paper clip and they could use that to move along the tick marks. You could even give them two different colored, what did I call them? Paper clips. um, and use it for addition or subtraction. This particular one, I had them do, well, an example, because obviously this is my writing, but I would have them do like a line of learning, basically. So, like, what is their takeaway? So, I use my number line to help me add. I can start at 7 and add 6 by moving my paperclip 6 places. That is 7 plus 6. And then they can do 3 examples. And just so you know, on this side, I actually had a few practice problems I gave them to get them used to using this number line. Another one, this is a second grade, addressing a second grade standard. This one is place value. So they drew their hundreds, tens, and ones and could make the number 357 and show some work on this side. So what I did was, obviously this is just a piece of regular paper cut in half long ways and taped it here so that they could fold it. And I folded it into 3 sections to show the hundreds, tens, and ones. And then it's taped down so you can flip it. They could flip it up and record any more work they wanted here. So just as a side note, their essential question was, how can I use manipulatives to solve word problems? So obviously they were using those usually green or blue place value blocks with the flats, the sticks, and the ones, the cubes, to figure this out. And then it says I can use base 10 blocks there. That's the word I was looking for. I can use base 10 blocks. I could use counters. I could use place value discs, and I'll show you those on another video. I could use place value chart, and I could draw a picture. So in this case, obviously they used the place value chart and drew a picture of their manipulatives, the base 10 blocks that they used, right? So it doesn't look like much, but they used 3 different ways to represent the number 357. And I can use the problem solving steps. 1, read the problem. 2, figure out what's missing. 3, stop and think about what tool I could use to help me solve. So this would be the input that the teacher gave them. And then we would cut out and glue the activity from page 273 here. So that's where, like when I was talking before about, if they have disposable textbooks that they actually like write in and you can pull the pages out, what we would do is cut out examples or pictures from the textbook and glue them into their interactive student notebook. And you'll see some examples in here of that. And then an LOL, they love that because that's a term we use all the time, right? But in our interactive student notebooks, it's line of learning. So then they would just write a summary of what they learned. So this line of learning is, I would read the problem and act it out with blocks. So I obviously wrote that as a second grader would, right? So here's another idea. I talked about how much you can use sticky notes in your interactive notebooks. And this has been used for years, and these are still in here. But if you were worried about them coming out, you could use a little piece of tape. But all they are sticky notes cut in half with different ways to multiply. So this is a 3rd grade. You can see from my tab up here, 3rd grade one. And we were working with equal groups, multiplying factors, product, repeated addition, and array. So these are actually vocabulary words. And underneath is the definition. So equal groups means have the same number of objects in each group. An array, they could write the definition, or obviously they could draw an array. but a set of objects arranged in rows and columns. Notice we're very specific in our wording, right? Part of our 8 mathematical practices is attend to precision. So we want to be really specific in our language. And then over here on the output side, they could show different ways. So the input was what we did together, was the vocabulary and making these flaps. And then the output was different ways. They drew a picture to represent each one of these vocabulary words. Here's another one. The properties of multiplication. This is another flip chart. You saw this in a previous video. So the properties of multiplication are 0, identity, commutative, associative, and distributive. That might be bringing back memories for some of you, right? And then they just have an example underneath. So anything times 0 is 0. Doesn't matter what it is. We had them make up their own number. Times 0, doesn't matter what that number is, 876 billion or whatever crazy number they want to come up with. When you multiply it by 0, still 0. Because you're multiplying it by nothing, right? Then this is the identity property. So that's the property that states anything times 1 is itself, right? So 1 times anything is itself, because it's itself 1 time, right? The commutative property, all of those. So another great way to use your interactive student notebook. Again, these are just sheets of regular paper cut in half that are different colors. Again, you notice because we used an even number, the 2 in the middle are the same color, but it never seemed to bother my students. If it bothered you, you could just alternate your colors, even with and make these half. So basically just cut these square sizes out, or rectangle sizes actually, out, and they would be different colors. But again, it never bothered my students to have the 2 in the middle be the same. We'll do one more today. Actually, maybe a couple more. We have a few minutes. So here's fractions. Sticky notes are awesome for fractions. So this obviously shows one whole sticky note. Then we gave out another sticky note and we're like, all right, show us half. So obviously they folded it in half. There's a crease there. I'm sure you can probably see it with the light. There's a crease there, and then we just labeled 1/2 and 1/2. In this way, it's very easy for your students to see that 2 halves makes 1 whole, because it's from the same size sticky note, from the same pad of sticky note paper. We did the same with 1/4. You can see that it's folded into quarters. And 8ths, you can see that it's folded into 8ths. Now, some of your students might need help with folding into 8ths because it does get a little bit small. And I wouldn't recommend going any smaller than 8ths because the pieces do get small and they're just hard to fold. It gets thick and it's hard to fold. So on the output side, this is just an example of something that the students would write. Using my sticky notes, I can see that there is 1 whole sticky note. Then I fold it in half and have 2 halves that make a whole. When I fold it in half again, that makes 4ths. So now we're talking about halves of halves, right? And then let's see, that means I can have 2 quarters in 1/2. I can have 2 fourths in 1/2. I can fold the fourths in half and get 8ths. Then I can see that 4/8 equals 1/2 or 2 fourths, right? So excellent, excellent, excellent for them to be able to visualize equivalent fractions. And then obviously they could draw a picture underneath because they're sticky notes and they flip up. We'll do one more real quick. Another one with place value, but it's place value involving the decimal point, right? So you have your ones, your decimal point, and then your tenths. And this is 1 whole cut into tenths. So you saw our fraction fringe before. This is cut into 10 equal pieces. And then underneath, cut into tenths. So it's shown as 1/10. So I can pull up just 1/10. And that would equal 0.1 or 1/10, right? So they could show this up here. And then here's another example. This is just cut out of their textbook and taped in. Decimals, it's not a period. We always used to say that because they talk about how they use periods at the end of a sentence. Well, a decimal point is not a period because it's not the end of a number always. Um, and then another example of how we cut out from this was just actually, I made a copy of what was in their textbook and printed this out, and then they cut it. I think this is from the Go Math series. So they could represent this. So don't feel like having a textbook and a more structured curriculum, which most of you will have, which is great. It gives you something to teach from. Don't feel like that limits you for what you can do, because you can always, even if you don't have the disposable textbooks where you can cut things out and paste them in, you can always make a copy of the page, have them cut it out and put it in. So you're still using the tools your school and your district are giving you. You're just using them in a different way that's more engaging, more hands-on. And then, like we've always said, then they have it all in one place that they can reference back to if they're struggling with something. So let's say you move on to hundredths, right? Those kids that are struggling can go back to their page on tenths and use it as a reference and be like, okay, well, this is what we did when we were using tenths. What would I do? How could I apply that to hundredths, right? So very, very good reference source for your kiddos that can be used in a multitude of ways. So don't feel like just because your school gives you a textbook, you are stuck with that. And yes, your lesson plans and what your principal expects to see when they come into that classroom is the use of that textbook, and you are using it. You're just using it in a different way. So don't let that stop you from, sorry, my hair's driving me nuts, from getting creative with it. I always tell my students, yes, and my students that are adults, right? So you guys or teachers that I'm working with, to your school and your county or your school district are going to put you in a box. Just learn how to dance around in that box and get creative.